Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the Reptile Barn. Today we're going to do our Monday conservation chat, and we're going to talk about chytrid fungus. And we're also going to zoom in on a kind of case study that gives some hope. So first off, what is chytrid fungus? Like the name implies, it's a fungus, right? And it afflicts virtually all species of amphibian. Okay? And the mortality rate is extremely high. It gets in their skin and disrupts their ability to regulate salt. You know, their skin is very, very permeable, and your cells are always trying to make sure that the salinity in the water in your cells is the right level. And the fungus stops that function, and eventually, I believe they die of heart failure. That's terrible. It's not a good way to die at all, and it spreads rapidly. Again, the mortality rate is like 90 something percent. It's driven multiple species into extinction already, and we're talking every group of amphibians, right? Frogs, toads, the newts and salamanders, Sicilians, whatnot. It's horrible. And we don't really have anything like a vaccine. Not that it's a virus, it's a fungus, but we don't have something that we can go inoculate to populations with. It's being studied extensively, but it's still wreaking havoc. Okay, it's really bad. And while we know what it is, we know what it does, we know why it's able to function this way, up until recently, we didn't really have anything we could do on a population level. I believe they can create these artificial, like, high temperature, not high temperature, but for a frog, high temperature chambers that can, like, treat an individual frog, but you can't do that on a large scale, right? For a population of frogs. And even then, it's not like it's a cure, but it can help. However, super interesting research was being done on the Sierra Nevada yellow-legged frog in Yosemite National Park, and they've made some discoveries. So, let me give you a little bit of background. Back a couple hundred years ago, this frog was all over the place, kind of in the backcountry of California, specifically in lakes. Usually higher elevation lakes. And during the gold rush, when all of a sudden tens of thousands of people are hiking into the backcountry like crazy, looking for, gold, they wanted readily available food, and they stocked almost all of the lakes with various types of fish, trout and things like that, right? Which decimated this yellow-legged frog population. It was near extinction, right? Already. And then chytrid fungus hit and knocked them back even further. So they are hanging on by a thread, right? Well, some science, fast forward to near present, some scientists found a couple of really, really remote lakes that had never had the trout and other, food fish introduced. And so their populations had stayed really, really large and stable until chytrid fungus. So they didn't get that double whammy. They only had chytrid fungus, which is bad enough. So these populations were not doing well. However, because they had been so much larger and therefore more genetically diverse, scientists studying these remote populations realized that a few of them, a small percentage of them, seemed to be becoming naturally resistant to chytrid fungus, which is a huge deal. Now, I believe we have since discovered that, like, the African clawed frog and the bullfrog maybe and a couple of others also seem to be developing some natural resistance to chytrid fungus. But those aren't endangered, and like, their populations aren't on imminent collapse, like this Sierra Nevada yellow-legged frog. And watching it kind of in real time, studying this population that had been massive, got smashed by the invasive fish, smashed even worse by chytrid fungus, and then all of a sudden to discover a couple of populations that were fighting back, basically, right? Evolutionarily speaking, was really exciting. So the scientists involved got permission to eradicate the trout, and there were a few other species, but the game fish basically that had been introduced and were rampantly invasive in a bunch of other lakes. They wiped them out completely, and then they got permission to start introducing the resistant strains of yellow-legged frogs into more and more lakes so that their population could expand back into their traditional habitat, their range, right? Their native range. And it's working. And it's working pretty quickly. More and more lakes are seeing really substantial numbers of this frog. So this is a cool case study for a few reasons. They did not set out to combat chytrid fungus, right? They were curious and interested and concerned about one species. And then they discovered things that led to this understand. Well, I don't know if I should say understanding. I don't think that they are super comprehending yet. I don't know if they've figured out what mechanism those frogs have developed to be resistant to chytrid fungus. I don't know if they've figured out what it is yet, but they have studied them enough and have enough data. They know they are absolutely resisting the fungus on their own. Humans didn't do anything, right? In fact, humans made it worse with the introduced fish. Two, a lot of times humans are bad for the environment, but it isn't greed or a desire to destroy. Sometimes it is, but in this case it wasn't. It was just people that were like, oh, we want to introduce some fish that are really good and have more food available, right? When we're out prospecting for gold. So nothing nefarious was done intentionally, but the effect on this frog and probably on a lot of other things in the environment was really bad, right? So that's something to be aware of. Obviously, we want to combat environmental problems that are being done on purpose, right? But sometimes it's completely on accident. And we still need to be aware of those problems. And then the last thing to highlight from this case study is that with some careful human intervention, the natural potential recovery of this species was able to get a footing and start to expand back into their native range. So that's living conservation at work, right? That's exactly what conservation is. It's carefully trying to help nature erase or recover from problems that usually we have introduced, right? Now, that's not always the case. Humans didn't cause the Ice Age, and we didn't end the Ice Age. Tons of animals went extinct because of those events, right? And modern humans weren't around to try and help them. And it's not just animals, it's plants too. So I'm not saying all extinction and all environmental destruction is human caused, but enough of it is that it's going to require human intervention to try and resist those problems, reverse those problems, etc. So yeah, this wasn't as long as some of the other videos. I've been reading about this case, and it's fascinating. And so I just wanted to bring it up to you guys and remind you, any of you who are in the animal keeping hobby, whether that's for pets or whatever, if you keep amphibians, be just absolutely cautious about chytrid fungus. Let me give you one last example of what I'm talking about. There is an excellent, excellent business company called Josh's Frogs. Really, really large producer of amphibians and, plants and some other things. As far as I've ever been aware, very ethical company. They treat their people well. They treat their animals well. They're very, very careful about biosecurity. And maybe a few weeks or a few months ago, they notified the public that they had, during routine testing, discovered chytrid fungus in their facility. And I was super impressed by their protocol. It was not just the transparency, which is impressive. I wish that weren't so notable. I wish everyone would be this transparent when they need to be. But in their case, they were very transparent. Immediately, I believe they also contacted like their last 12 months of customers or something like that. Just spreading the word. We got to be super careful about this. They tested every single animal. I don't think individually, but what you can do is, for most things, I don't know how it works with chytrid fungus, but for a lot of things that you want to test for, you can get a group of animals and get a group sample, and if that sample tests negative, they're all negative, right? So you can divide your very, very large group of animals into smaller groups, so that instead of testing 10,000 animals, you're testing a few hundred times, which is still very expensive, but certainly not as expensive or time consuming or just literally impossible as testing every single thing, right? So I'm assuming that's what they did. And they isolated it down to a handful of animals, which they then immediately traced to where they had acquired those animals from, which apparently was also from a place that was very, very, very biosecure. And they discovered what went wrong. And they figured out the whole chain. They isolated the animals that were sick. Instead of just euthanizing them, I believe they are trying to treat every single one of them, which again, really impressed with these guys and what they've done. Because boy, would it be just easier to be like, these are already sick, potentially going to die. Let's just euthanize them and be done. Humanely, of course, rather than have to have, a totally separate quarantine facility. I imagine they have to have different staff dealing with that facility so that they're not bringing pathogens back and forth. It must be a logistical nightmare, not to mention expensive. And I don't remember what kind of amphibians these are, but I can't imagine that this is a profitable thing for them to be doing, but they're doing it anyways. They're doing right by the animals, right by their customers. And to me, that's the best possible way to deal with a horrible problem like this, right? You hear rumors. I don't want to name any names, but you hear rumors sometimes of large breeders or facilities that maybe are dealing with nidovirus or crypto or something real scary like that, and they try and just sweep it under the rug. They deny the problems. They aren't doing it right by the animal or by their customers, because it would be financially devastating for them to do so. So they just don't. Now, again, I'm not making any specific accusations anywhere. If you guys have names in mind, I'm not going to confirm or deny. I'm not trying to point the finger at anybody, but let's be honest. Like, in the world of business, is it really known for integrity? I'm just going to leave it there. But Josh's Frogs, super, super impressive. They're getting it under control, and they will be back up and running. Maybe they already are. I'm not sure. I haven't followed this carefully. But if you are keeping amphibians of any sort, be hyper vigilant about crypto. I'm sorry, not crypto. Chytrid fungus. There we go. So Um, that is all. I hope that this was enjoyable or interesting at least. I have a lot more of these. I'm gonna try and do a couple with some of the species that I keep. I know we talked about the blue tree monitors and the indigos. Some of these are going to be um, animals that I don't have. I could have brought my red-eyed tree frogs out, but I'm actually out of the gloves right now, and I don't like touching them with my bare hands. That can irritate their very permeable skin we talked about. So, anyways, that is all. Let me know what you think, and we will keep doing this every Monday as long as people like them. And thank you so much for watching. Till next time, we are the Reptile Barn.